Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But can we keep the part where I yell more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like what? 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, do you want to start with that?
Here we go. Exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing it the exact same way? Let's start with the Smoky Bar.
No. It's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
All right, and we should be live. So welcome everyone to the Wisdom Check. I am Jeff. Across from me on the far side is Dustin, who made it between hospital visits here. So good to have you, Dustin.
Hey, it's good to be back, Jeff.
Excellent. And we are joined tonight by Jennell Jaquays. She is an artist, a game designer for both tabletop RPGs and video games. You'll probably recognize some of the works. So if you've ever seen Dark Tower, Caverns of Thracia, if you played Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Quake, Age of Empires, Halo Wars, then you probably have her to thank. And if that's not enough...
Or blame.
What's
or
that?
blame.
Oh, did I miss one? Okay, sorry.
We said or blame.
Or blame.
Fair enough. And if that wasn't enough, she's also an advocate for transgender human rights. So thank you so much for joining me today, and Dustin as well on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Much appreciated. So yeah, we are happy to have everyone in the chat as well. If you are new to the chat, by the way, we have a feature at the bottom of the chat section where you can redeem a wisdom check question. Provided that your question is appropriate, we'll ask it and we'll make sure it gets answered. So go ahead and take advantage of that where you can. So with all the introductions out of the way here. Oh, we got to follow. Thank you, Substance Used. Much appreciated.
Substances used.
So the way we usually like to get started is to kind of go down back into the history of our guest and find out what it was that brought them into the hobby of tabletop role-playing games.
Okay. Well, going way back to my childhood, it was wooden blocks.
Okay.
Wooden blocks.
Wooden blocks.
Like Lincoln Logs or...
I had Lincoln Logs too, but when I was like 4 or 5 years old, my grandparents gave us these incredible maple wood blocks. And then I had some other wooden blocks, and my brother and I used to literally just build our own little fantasy worlds with these blocks, with armed soldiers, with plastic animals. And this was, we were doing our own storytelling. Mm-hmm. In these fantasy worlds. Sometimes they were spaceships, sometimes they were cities. And this is how we started just building things together. Mm-hmm. When I was like 10 or 11, I was actually drawing my own board games.
Wow.
So we're going to talk about it in the Kickstarter, but one of the pictures that was in one of the updates in the Kickstarter was a photograph of a bedroom floor covering board game that my brother and I had made. That was all about moving around with random dice rolls. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I come out from. And then comic books. I was a huge comic book nerd through middle school and through high school and on into college. And when I got into college, I was actually working in the college radio station. Mm-hmm. And this is October 1975. Mm-hmm. And my brother calls me up on the phone at work. I was a disc jockey at that time, running records, so we could chat on the phone between announcements. And my brother is actually the gamer in the family. That has to be made clear.
Okay.
He is the gamer. And we had gotten started playing some of the early Avalon Hill games.
Mm-hmm.
He subscribed to the General because that was their house publication. Because he was a subscriber, a game company called Metagaming Concepts sent my brother a copy of the magazine, The Space Gamer, free copy.
Wow.
Inside of it were 2 reviews for this game called Dungeons and Dragons. And he read me that review over the phone. And if you've ever had moments in your life when you can almost see your life changing direction, that was one of them.
Man.
And so...
Just out of curiosity, was the review any good?
Did they like it? Yeah, they were. They basically what they stressed was the amount of work you had to put into the game to get something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fair.
I think both of them barely filled a page, so they were overall positive.
Mm-hmm.
But it was positive enough to drag, for me to part with $15 to get a white box set and a copy of Greyhawk.
Wow.
Well, what showed up first was the copy of Greyhawk, and I think maybe Chainmail. So whatever I know about the game, I learned first from the supplement.
Oh, interesting.
In fact, I wouldn't even see a copy of the rules until like the next February, because in between they ran out of stock. Christmas happened. And then I was on a month-long art trip with a college class in Europe in January. So we got back, and there was the game waiting for me, except I found out that somehow my friends had already gotten their hands on it and were already playing.
Demon wait. That's just rude.
Yeah. But you say we talk about the first, you want to talk about like the first game. I had a friend in college, and she had a friend from where she lived back in high school, and he was a game master. I'm going to put quotes or air quotes around that.
Game master.
He was a game master. He was a DM. Now, this was like this holy title.
Yeah.
Because you have to understand, we were I was 19, and hadn't played yet. So he drove up from, we were living I was in southern Michigan going to school, and he came up from a town that was about an hour and a half away. And in the lobby of the radio station where we were working that night, he ran this first game of Dungeons and Dragons for us. It was like myself and 2 other friends.
Wow.
And I played a wizard or a magic user, and my magic user died.
Oh, no.
In the first game? How'd you die?
First game, I think it was killed by a carrion crawler or paralyzed by a carrion crawler and then killed by the orcs that came along.
Man.
Now, for the people that are used to 5e and maybe newer editions, like, it was very possible that your wizard may have only had like 2 hit points at first level.
Yeah, I think
Wizards were hard to survive those early levels, but if they did, then there was nothing that could stop them once they hit a point.
Right.
They became
So
super powerful.
That was a quick introduction to death.
Well, we've seen it with wizards a few times in those older editions, where it's like someone in the party pushes the branch out of the way and it snaps back, kills the wizard. Like, hey, new character. Like, it
that may or may not have happened to me.
that may or may not have happened in a game of ours. So we understand the fragility of the very fragile nature of wizards when it comes to early editions.
right, you just needed to get them up to 5th level, so they got the first fireball spell.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then after that, you just fireballed everything, so nothing got that close to you.
Game over.
So what drew your attention to the wizard class at the start?
I think it was just because the whole idea of playing someone who could throw magic. It was I'm still trying to remember who was there that night. I'm pretty certain it was my friend Mark. And the other player might have been my brother.
Nice.
So my younger brother. So because I went to school about 5 minutes away by car from where I lived.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm.
But I still lived on campus.
Now, these early games that you were a part of, were you guys using a lot of maps and gridded stuff, or was there miniatures? Was it just all theater of the mind?
At that point, it was pretty much all theater of the mind. Over the next year, I'd start acquiring a few miniatures, and we'd start painting them. I still have some of those in my collection, some from those very first figures. But we never really did anything structured with it for several years.
Mm-hmm.
It was more in D&D, the original D&D kind of allowed for that.
Mm-hmm.
When we picked up some other games like RuneQuest, RuneQuest needed to be more tactical.
Right, yeah.
And so we actually did start laying out the battle mat, and I had things to make walls out of paper and circle shapes, things like that.
It's always impressed me when we hear some of people who played back in first edition talk about their games, that for something that came out of wargaming, which was all miniatures and all tactical movement, just how few people were using those things in their early, first edition Dungeons and Dragons games, when it was clearly came out of wargaming, but it clearly broke away early.
I think one of the things I discovered is that I got a copy of the chainmail rules at the same time I got Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
And there was the idea that you needed that, and it ended up just being confusing. It was a while before we figured out that we'd been doing it wrong.
Doing it wrong?
Wrong, yeah, wrong.
I mean, until we actually started interacting with other people, like at a game convention, we didn't know how to play. We were just making things up, what we thought were the rules.
I think that's true for most gaming groups. So, for our gaming group, we were pretty isolated, small town. We came up, we knew a few people that played, but mostly it was just our friends group. And it wasn't for years, until we hit the convention scene, that you see a different table and you go, that's not how we do that at all. We play a very different game. And
yes.
It's really eye-opening whenever you kind of get out there and get to see who all does what, and what attracts them to the game, what they focus on, and, what their approach is, really, because it feels like a different game at every table. And that's really cool.
One of our experience was that, again, we each kind of approached the game differently. We each told our stories differently, had different ideas, but it wasn't until we got to our first game convention, and I think by this point, AD&D had started creeping in, and the whole idea there was, standardized tournament rules, which was the real focus of AD&D. And I'm trying to remember, I think we actually played with those when the first Gen Con I went to, which was 77.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a way back machine. I'm trying to think of the first time I went to Gen Con, and it was still up north, so it must have been in the early 90s, I'm guessing.
Okay, yeah, I was going back. I was going again at that point. I went to, my first one was 77 in Lake Geneva. I would say I'll pop my story. I'll pop up the book and say I described that in detail in the book.
Right on.
There's an entire chapter devoted to that Lake Geneva trip.
Let me
or an
link your
entire
stuff.
essay, I should say, devoted to it.
Excellent.
But that was our first one, and then I wouldn't go back again till 1979, I think, when I was with Judges Guild.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. And before we get there, I just dropped your link for your Kickstarter into the chat. So
thank you.
You're very welcome. The things that we're referencing are in that. That is a Kickstarter. We're going to talk a little bit more in detail here soon, I'm sure, because it kind of touches on the Judges Guild. Yep. But they have 4 days remaining, and it looks like it's already been funded. So go check that out.
At this point, back on because you won it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're 40. We funded it. When I say we, it's Goodman Games that's producing the Kickstarter. But the book is primarily about me, or it should say my 1 year at Judges Guild and the time leading up to it.
Okay.
That was the thing we were talking about beforehand. That it's interesting how, in certain circles of people, like 1 year of your life could become what you're defined as for the rest of your time.
Well, the weird thing is over my time is I have done, as we were talking earlier, so many different things.
Absolutely.
And people who know me from those different times in my life know me as a different person or as a different career focus.
Sure.
If we want to go and talk later when we'll talk about TSR, I'll explain how I got in there as an artist, because there's a link back to an earlier part of my career where I worked on video games. There was some people crossovers there.
It's really interesting because that's something we've run into on the show. Is that at least the tabletop role playing circuit is very tight knit. Like once you start to meet a few people, it seems like you know everybody, and maybe not everybody, but it seems like you know a lot of people, like in that second degree level. And I'm guessing the video game industry is similar to that. Maybe not as extreme on that level, but it's
well.
Really
there's a lot of communities, and communities within communities. I'm back in the Dallas area, and my wife and I hang out with, I guess, what used to be called in the late '90s the Dallas Mafia.
Okay.
Or the Dallas Gaming Mafia.
Yeah.
Who were people who were the heads of studios or movers and shakers at some of the studios that were active back or more active back around that time. Well, I never did anything with these people. I never got out of the house. I had small children at home, and I went from work to home, and that was pretty much it. I didn't get involved with people in the community till I got involved in helping to create a school.
Yeah.
So
that was something else I wanted to talk about later. It's just like so many things.
Is that one of those things that when anyone asks you if you're in the Dallas Gaming Mafia, you just answer yes, right, though, because you want to be in? So you're just like, yeah, sure, I'm in the Mafia.
I'm off the edge. I know some of the people as friends. I know some of the people as acquaintances. Like, there's one of the guys who founded probably the core company that started all the Dallas game companies. And I met him for the first time at lunch last week.
Wow.
And we didn't even, he's in my Facebook friends, but we didn't really even talk about that. So,
Facebook friends. Yeah. It's just things disappear.
He was the guy who founded the company that literally every game company in Dallas sprung out of at one point.
Wow.
And it was not id Software.
Huh. Wow. Okay. Well, let's circle back here. So we were talking about Judges Guild. Thank you, Air Laser, for the host, by the way. Much appreciated for that. So we were talking a little bit about those kind of origin times and, getting connected to people. This is pretty much where it starts, right? So you found yourself working with some of the originals. And Air Laser, thank you for the bits as well. It's making it rain on us all of a sudden. Thank you for that.
So I can say it actually goes back a little before, because we were talking about my first game group.
Right.
Well, we were, you talked about being isolated. We were isolated. I think we were the only people playing Dungeons and Dragons in the county I lived in Michigan. We didn't know anybody else. You couldn't buy the game at the local hobby stop because it was a toy company, and they were still they were still in that stage before Toys R Us became the big thing.
Right, yeah.
So they didn't have the game. I had to go up to a college town, East Lansing, Michigan, to find anything. So we decided that, we didn't see anything out there for the game. And me being an artist and a would-be writer and things like that, and my other friends being, imagining ourselves to be writers, we ended up deciding the idea we should make a magazine.
Boy, ambitious.
This is 1976 early, and we said, well, let's make a game magazine, and we'll produce it and sell it by mail. And I'll go check with TSR to make sure it's okay. It's fan magazine. We're talking to fan magazine.
Zine.
So,
wasn't too easy.
So I actually was in communication with Tim Kask at this point, and we cleared the name and got permission to do a zine as long as we didn't produce their material inside our magazine.
Got you. Yeah.
So there's original material that can
original material
that could be associated with their game, but not directly from their game.
Exactly. So I couldn't grab a table out and put it in.
Right.
But, I could write a new monster or write this crazy idea of a published adventure.
Or at best reference a table, but not put the table in, right? Like use table on page whatever of the DMG. But you couldn't put the table itself in.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So we ended up writing all the stuff ourselves. Well, we got permission, and then my friend Mark and I think one other friend created a bunch of material. It ended up being 8 pages, digest sized.
Okay.
And I did a cover for it. So one of the pages was a full cover, full piece of artwork. We set it up in columns, justified columns. That was a trick with a typewriter.
I imagine.
And one of the things that got included was a game adventure. Now, at that point, as far as we knew, no one was publishing game adventures anywhere.
Man. So where did the idea come from then? So I'm trying to think of,
probably my own hubris, but
we think back to our games, like we've always done kind of homebrew stuff, but it wasn't until like recent years that we started talking about, sharing it with other people or, and broadcasting it, or in Dustin's case, actually trying to work on a module of his own. That's just such an undertaking. That's especially without an obvious example of one already out there.
Well, at this point, I'd already been working on the school newspaper. I ran for the previous year. I had run in the school councils, student council elections, to be the editor of the school newspaper. Well, I lost. But I still came in and I worked on the newspaper, and my job ended up being production. And because I was local to the school, I had access to all the tools I needed to do typesetting, camera work, things like that.
Okay.
And I produced literally by myself that summer at least a couple of the issues of the first issues of the school newspaper, so that when students came back in the fall of 1975, they had a magazine. They had a first school newspaper to come back to.
Wow!
And I was already building those skills that I was going to need to do the Dungeoneer the next spring.
Yeah, because there's a lot of skill sets you have to acquire for that.
Right. Just the fact that you're a writer, artist, and you can do all the production stuff. That's rare to find someone. You usually find an artist who can't tell a story or write or anything else. They just do the art, and here you go, there's the art. But like you're kind of doing it all.
I always thought it was more of a personality defect that I couldn't stay focused on any one task for any particular length of time. I still have that problem, so
I think it runs in the hobby.
The best way to solve that is to do all the tasks and just do them until I don't want to work it anymore, then go back and do the next thing. So just it worked out that I could do the typesetting, and I figured out how to do justification. We did, but we were trying to figure out, well, how can we get an adventure to fit in there? And I went through some of my notebooks, and there was a little mini adventure, a little sub corner of one of my dungeons. And that got converted into what we called Fachelrak's Tomb, which is the first. Well, everyone thought it was one of the first. It turns out I was like the third.
Oh, okay.
But first in the U.S., first in a magazine, first in the USA, or first in a magazine in the USA. The guys who eventually did Games Workshop had actually produced a little section of a dungeon in like a games and puzzles magazine in the UK. just a few weeks before.
Of course.
It all happened around the same time. And then I found out later that a company called We Wizards, I think it was, had done the first actual published game adventure. We Warriors had done the first actual game adventure that same summer that we produced The Dungeoneer. So we missed first by 2 weeks.
Now, this seems to happen with invention all the time. I mean, there's co-discovery of things. Like, what were the similarities and differences between those first products?
Similarities. The one in the UK, and I'll be honest, I only saw this like within the last month and a half. So we're talking, it's over 40 years later that I actually saw it when someone brought it to my attention. And ruined my day.
Oh no!
You thought you were first till then, right?
Yeah, at least second. At least I was second.
Always got to be somebody.
That's like somebody was famous for a discovery, and somebody finds the fossil bone that like disproves their.
Exactly. Yeah, but hey, I'm already in the history book, so there.
There you are.
So we were. The other one was very bare bones. A lot of it was like computer generated and printed and sold it in a folio, but he sold it through TSR's hobby shop.
Okay.
Palace of the Vampire Queen, I think it was.
Okay.
But the difference that people will say now is that 40 some years later, one of these adventures is still playable. And that girl is me.
Well, congratulations. Making it on top.
Yeah.
So what do you think the key to success was there? Was there a particular thing you focused on? Was it descriptions, layout?
Well, one, it was weirdness.
Okay.
My people started seeing some of my first design styles in some of the adventures, usually like weird magic, statues that you probably shouldn't mess with. And then verticality.
Okay.
Instead of everything being flat on a level, this adventure was already based around multiple levels going down, even though it all fit on like 3 pages.
Huh.
Okay. So you may have been the first to actually do levels of a dungeon.
No, I think Gary Gygax had that.
He had already figured out by the time you were.
But what I was doing was doing more thinking in 3 dimensions.
Okay.
Because I actually there was one of the rooms in that dungeon that actually had to be drawn in side view to make sense.
Oh, all right. So you were literally tackling the map from different directions, like when you're like the actual setting, you're looking at it camera angle wise, like from various angles. Then
I was not. It was still front side or top side, but orthographic would come on. People start figuring, we can do this orthographically. That was much later. I think that ended up with White Plume Mountain. I think did that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that from TSR.
It's always interesting kind of going back and realizing that there were certain things that we take for granted that, had to be invented at some point. It's just like, clearly, orthographic angles, that's, it seems obvious now, but, clearly this wasn't a thing then. And,
if you're drawing by hand, it's pretty tough to do, actually, unless you're a draftsman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and particularly for something like this where you have to be precise, your measurements matter and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting. So what we did with the magazine is we got their permission to do it. I set everything up, and I scraped up like $100 or so, and we went to a local quick print shop and printed off like 200 copies. Yeah,
I really thought you were going to say that you snuck in and used the printing press where you made your high school newspaper to print out your first.
No, I would do some things later on I'm not entirely proud of, involving midnight use of facilities.
Are we out of the statute of limitations yet?
Pardon?
Are we out of the statute of limitations yet?
After 40 years, we better be. Nobody died. I think we're cool there.
All good.
So we went and printed it, and then we had been doing research on buying game magazines, looking inside. We got copies of Alarms and Excursions, the Apazines, and we mined those resources for names and addresses of people who were likely to play Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow.
And we did this terrible thing where we sent about 100 people copies of the magazine for free.
Oh.
Nice.
Now you'd think, well, wow, that's pretty neat. Except for the letters we got back from at least 2 people who said, this game is destroying the hobby. Why did you send me this? Never send me anything like this again.
Wow.
Destroying the hobby.
Your particular writing as destroy the hobby. That's tremendous.
They were talking about tabletop wargaming. They were particularly referring to tabletop wargaming.
Okay, all right.
It's amazing that mentality is never fully lost, because now there's people who think the newer editions are ruining the hobby, that ruin the other hobby, that ruin the other hobby. So, it's
I skipped over, that's later and much later in the story, but I completely skipped over version wars for edition wars.
Probably for the best. Yeah.
I wrote that part out. I was on hiatus. But so we made this game, we sent it out, and we said, here's how much to subscribe. And I think it was $3 for 6 issues. And that included postage.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Were you making any money?
I made a little bit of money. Didn't get rich.
Yeah.
But I made a little bit of money.
Okay.
But we were good capitalists, and we reinvested it.
Good.
Right.
So,
that's what you have to do, right?
Right. So what we got in subscriptions. In fact, one of the stories is James M. Ward, who was publishing Metamorphosis Alpha that summer through TSR, was our first subscriber.
Huh. Oh. Nice pickup there.
And one of our first contributors, outside contributors.
Oh, man, that's a good connection to make.
So we ended up, over the course of the next, let me see, that was summer of 76. Through the end of 1978, we produced a total of 6 issues. We were going to try and do it bi-monthly, but the availability, we didn't get as much outside contributions as we had hoped for. The problem with work when you're students and trying to do classwork meant that came first. By the time we was really into it, I was an upperclassman and an art student.
Yeah, that's impossible at that point.
Taking, by the time I graduated, I had the equivalent of a major minor in art, and a good share of that was studio art. So I was putting a lot of time in there, and I was working at the radio station, and they're vainly trying to have a social life. So, and game.
Gaming was a social life, right? I mean,
yeah, but there was social life, and then there was gaming,
right?
And if we were lucky, we could combine the two.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because like us, even many years later, like we didn't exactly heavily promote that we gamed. It was still not a thing you just didn't go around and tell people, and I'm sure that was the case. Back then. This was the 70s. People didn't even know what we were doing, and so we were hiding up in lounges or in dorm rooms. I can remember one time we played a game sitting in the stairwell of the field house. Oh,
the best part about these sorts of stories, because this is true for us too, but like it's always those scenes in a movie, where like the conservative parents coming up to like bust their kids smoking something, and they come up and you're like holding dice, like, what are you doing? I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons.
No, we're gambling, Mom. Okay.
Oh, okay, we're good then. Just so long as it's not the Dungeons and Dragons thing.
Yeah.
Actually, that hadn't hit yet.
We were the 80s.
We were a few years off from. At least they're not we're not demon worshippers.
Hide everything but the D6s. The D6s are standard. Everyone understands them. You can leave them out. Hide everything but the 6s.
Yahtzee. We're playing Yahtzee.
That's right. How dare you re-roll those 2s? He'll never win with that kind of system.
So we got these 6 issues out, and by the end of December 77, I had another semester to go in school, and these were just taking too long to get out. It wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah,
most of my staff was trying to, we were all upperclassmen. We were trying to graduate. It ended up, I found someone else who could buy the magazine off me.
Nice.
So you actually sold it.
I actually sold it, and he got the subscription list. He got all my art, my slush file. He got everything except the cash in the bank. And that's what I sold it for, was the cash in the bank.
Nice.
Now, how long did it continue on after that? Was he able to do anything with it?
The publisher was Chuck Anshell. He had a company called Anshell Miniatures based out of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And he produced 2 issues through the fall of 78. Then he went to go work for Judges Guild, and he took the magazine with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it went on for another 10 issues, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And they did produce it on a regular basis. So, and that's actually because he was there. That's how I ended up there.
Did you ever get copies of those issues that were put out after?
I did. Yeah, in fact, I made sure that everyone who worked on the magazine got copies of them from the the group I was
fantastic.
with.
Good.
Yeah, so it worked out. It worked out quite well. Now the magazine under his production looked a lot different. He actually had a typesetting machine. He did a lot more pages.
Mm-hmm.
Everything, most of the stuff came in from the outside.
Gotcha.
At that point, I contributed very little. I think I did 1 cover and some interior stuff, but no more game adventures until I was actually at Judges Guild.
Gotcha. So
I was going to say, Jeff, why don't we go ahead and just talk about what Judges Guild is for people who maybe aren't familiar with it?
Okay, Judges Guild, a company that got started around 1976 by a gentleman by the name of Bob Bledsaw. He and one of his gaming buddies, they were from Southern Illinois, over in Decatur, Illinois, and they were gamers, and they had this idea that they could produce these supplements for Dungeons and Dragons and sell them as a subscription. And by supplements, they meant ready ref sheets, small dungeon maps, and even some completely worked out game adventures. And this massive thing, I believe, was called City State of the World Emperor.
Okay.
What? Okay. I don't think I've heard of that.
That's a nice title.
And they got the license from TSR to produce product for first Dungeons and Dragons and then later Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. Now, this is 1976, 77. TSR wasn't doing that. They didn't see a market for it. Mm-hmm. Judges Guild produced these products very cheaply, both in cost of production and what they could sell them for, even compared to other product. Mm-hmm. And they produced a lot of it, and they showed that there was actually a market for pre-factored game adventures.
So this is kind of the origin place where something like currently like a drive-through RPG would be doing the same sort of thing, but this is in its like infancy for third-party people to be producing content for communities.
Right, but they say they worked under license. They were an independent publisher, and they had to clear everything they did for Dungeons and Dragons with TSR, which ended up being eventually a point of conflict.
I imagine.
Both for
I'm
them.
sure as TSR decided to take what they were doing and be like, hey, we could do that ourselves, and they started putting out their own content.
They eventually did, and you ended up with they eventually produced the Against the Giants campaign and the Drow campaign. Those were some of the first, and they started realizing they could do this. They could print money with this.
Right. Exactly.
Whereas Judges Guild, but in that summer that they ran the Against the Giants campaign, that fall was when I ended up going to work for Judges Guild and joining them as an artist and a game designer or content. I call it an adventure designer, content developer.
Mm-hmm.
Content.
Yeah,
practically making up the titles at this point, that era, right? Like, because I mean, the industry is so new at that point. Yeah. I was an adventure writer, game designer, whatever. But what I didn't do is I didn't design game systems. Mm-hmm.
I never made a game.
Yeah.
But what I did do was I wrote stories that were set in those games.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a game developer. Somebody once described us as being, well, we were wannabe novelists. And
Yes.
yet here we were creating stories that had no protagonists.
Mm-hmm.
Just settings.
I mean, that's something we've talked about in the past here. Is it's there's a fascinating difference between standard writing and writing for a game. Where standard writing, you're scripting everything out. Where everyone's going to be. What they're going to say. The direction of everything. But this is a game, and you have other people contributing all along, and so just trying to fabricate any kind of game that's going to work. And then having any sense of where that's going to go, go like 3 sessions in, it's like a near impossibility.
Well, I know we talk a lot when you're writing for standard like a novel. Most stories follow the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of joke like when you're writing for a game, you have to basically write like 5 heroes' journeys because you have to write for each character to a degree. Like when you're role playing, but if you're creating like an adventure, you're kind of almost going back the other direction a bit because whatever random group of 5 characters get in there, they got to be able to tackle the content, relatively the same. So then you kind of set it up like more like the old hero's journey in that fashion.
One of the ways that I know that, because I eventually end up having to doing similar type of design in computer role-playing games, was that you go in and you think about not just what's your one solution for a puzzle or a situation. You have to think, okay, what are a half dozen ways that this could be solved, and leave it flexible enough so that the GM has room to solve it when the other half dozen are figured out.
Right.
Yeah, and it's got it's a balancing act too, because you don't want to give too much information because you want somebody to feel like they accomplished something, but you don't want to make it too obtuse. It's a struggle.
Well, I know that back then I used to be very spare in my writing. I think it was just because I was writing against tight deadlines and tight space considerations.
Mm-hmm.
These days, I'm a lot more generous with detail. I provide, because the games themselves have become more detail focused.
Yeah.
Back then, I like to describe it, where everything was wahoo. You could be as flexible as you want. You could be very flexible in the way you worked out game situations. Now these days, it's okay, I've got this advantage, I'm using this bonus here, and I can move these many squares to reach this location in a move. And so you're thinking, okay, well, I got to write and design in ways that really anticipate that level of detail.
Right.
And I have significantly changed the way I write and present my content.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I'm a lot more compartmentalized in my design now.
It's interesting. Yeah, Malice in the chat here, he's worked on some video games, and he was saying this is one of the reasons why you get lazy content in video games of like kill 10 of whatever, because lots of folks have problems writing with the open-ended flavor.
I need 10 pieces of fur from these wolves.
And only those wolves. Ignore the other wolves. Only those wolves will do.
Because if you try to go to the other wolves, they're in the other part of the zone, and they will mess you up.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So how did you transition from writing for tabletop RPGs to video game? How did that transition come about?
Well, there's a story attached to that. Of course there is.
Good.
I was working on tabletop video games. I spent only 1 year, or tabletop role-playing games. I only spent a year at Judges Guild. At the end of that year, I'm going to admit I was a bit of a prima donna, and I thought I could do much better for myself in the outside world. And I gave my notice. Again, in that book, we'll talk about Kickstarter. We'll talk about later. I go into a lot of detail of how that happened, but I ended up leaving Judges Guild and going out on my own as a freelance artist and game developer. Mm-hmm. During the year that followed, I worked for a number of different clients. I worked on comic books for a safety company. I worked on for advertising agencies. I worked on game content and went to game conventions still. And at one of them, I met Rick Loomis. I actually had met him before, but I met up with Rick Loomis again from Flying Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Hey, I've got one of the guys who works with me here. He's up here, and we're up in Michigan." And he says, "Hey, Mike Stackpole wants to meet you." And Mike Stackpole was working on the Tunnels and Trolls product line at the time, and we made an acquaintance, chatted up a bit, and then they went back to Arizona. I went back to my home there in southern Michigan. But about a week later, I got a call from Mike, and I said, "Hey," he says, "Hey, I'm out in Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm working at this toy company called Coleco, and they're working on a project that they could use another designer to work on a role-playing project for them. Are you available?" And I thought, well, yeah, I'm kind of going broke right now, so I guess I'm available. Yeah, it was a tough year that year, and I just bought a small computer and was using that for word processing. But I ended up going out and interviewing with the company, and ended up by the end of the interview, the guy who ran the Advanced Research and Development Group hired me as a contractor.
Oh, wow.
For 15 weeks, 45 days. And so I flew back home, packed my bags, flew back to Connecticut, and Mike and I worked on a role-playing game rules, super simple, that worked with this amazing new technology. It was a barcode reader. Now, this is 1980. Mm-hmm. Okay. It was a barcode reader that would read a card that you fed through it with some barcode on it. Then that would be interpreted by a TI speech phoning chip and turned into speech.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
So what we were doing was coming up with a simple game where we used this speak and spell sort of technology to read in dice, read in encounters off cards.
Oh, okay.
And
I see where this is going now.
Man, that's clever.
Yeah, and then we had to
actually. I was like, let's see where this is.
We had to figure out how to get the phonemes to say the words we wanted to say.
Wow.
Have a plotter draw those out on an index card, and then that fed through mechanically through our reader. And there was a little bit of, and then we had a game board that went with it. So we made this game when we made a few others. Well, in the end, that hardware didn't go anywhere. I have no idea if it wasn't sexy enough or just cost too much money.
Yeah.
So
that's probably, it's really cool technology, but it's probably hard for people to have the vision to take advantage of that at the time.
Well, this was you said when you work inside a toy company, it's constant, especially in the electronics. It was constantly trying to come up with ideas for product that you would sell in a year or 2 years.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the other thing that was really interesting is how quickly the technology was changing at that time, right? Because we're looking at the two Atari systems, and then ColecoVision, I think, was from 83 to 85, probably?
82 through 85. Okay.
And then, from there we get, a Nintendo Entertainment System that most of our audience is probably familiar with.
I was there for, I think it was mid-February, late February. I think the contract may have run through the early March. Well, by the time the contract was nearly done, Coleco came to both Mike and I and offered us jobs.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
Yeah, I stayed. Mike left.
Mm-hmm.
He went on to said his heart was set on becoming a best-selling fantasy novelist.
Gotcha.
My goal was to maybe get married and be able to afford a life.
Understand that.
Working to live, not living to work, right? I mean,
Yeah. So I ended up staying with Coleco through the summer of 1985, through the entire life cycle of the video games. But at that time, we didn't have video. When I was working there, video games weren't a thing for the company yet. In fact, we went through the company. We had just done an electronic product called Alien Attack. That was a fairly simple LED game.
Okay.
And not after that product shift, there was a political war inside Coleco, and the department I was in lost.
Oh, okay.
So we ended up, they took all the engineers, they put them into a separate group, and it ended up being like 2 other designers and I, and a secretary stuffed in a room down in the basement while our director and his secretary were elsewhere in the company.
Wow.
And that's the way we lived through the rest of that summer. And then somebody came up brought this electronic toy into the office, and it was a little simulated arcade, playing the video game Galaxian.
Right.
Galaxian, but using a vacuum fluorescent tube. So all the symbols, all the ships were pre-printed on the surface, and when you excited the electrons behind them, that little area glowed.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I actually think I had one of those back then. Those were...
Well, that was the first of our tabletop arcade games. I worked on the next one, which was Pac-Man.
Okay.
Tabletop Pac-Man. And
so a little bit of success there.
It was a huge success. It was a huge seller. I think
Absolutely.
We sold like 4 million units for that next Christmas.
That's incredible.
And I actually drew the final, did some of the final art for that screen, the layout of it. But then for the next game, which was Donkey Kong had just become a big thing in the arcades. I actually drew the artwork that went on the vacuum fluorescent display and did the design analysis and documentation writing for that we gave to the programmers to create the game.
Wow. Yeah, because we were talking beforehand, just kind of like, I have a computer science degree, so I'm like interested in the back end of the engineering side of things. I was looking at the specs on this machine. It was like 16 kilobytes of information on this machine. So like, just anything you could pull off with this at all, I'm in awe of.
Well, this was 4-bit. This was 4-bit in software.
Wow.
We weren't even up to working on video hardware yet. That came later in the year when Coleco finally noticed. Well, one of the things you have to understand about Coleco is that they were never first in anything.
Okay.
They were a Me Too company.
Gotcha.
Oh, look, someone's making money over here. Oh, me too. We can make money doing that. We can do it cheaper.
Gotcha.
And that was Coleco. And that's how we got ColecoVision, in that they saw Mattel and Atari making money, printing money with these video games, and wanted to figure out how they could get into it.
Right, yeah.
And that was how ColecoVision was born. They put out an edict to what was left to the joint engineering departments, and they came up with the specs that used off-the-shelf parts to create ColecoVision. And one of the things that they didn't anticipate was the way that the Atari works is different from the way that the ColecoVision works. if you're familiar with like a Commodore 64 or a TI graphics computer, their graphics are generated by 8-bit tiles, color and shape. You have to store those tiles. They with the Atari, everything's done by timing. So literally the Atari game is drawn on the fly, scan line by scan line, but it's all done with mathematical algorithms. With tile-based games like ColecoVision, they actually have to store all those tiles, and then instead of drawing the individual tiles, they just call the tile reference and put it up. That's how. So you get you can get more complex images, but it takes memory.
Right.
And RAM in 1980 was, and you will pardon my first use of an expletive, RAM was fucking expensive back then.
Truth.
I can imagine.
So true. So true.
So what they didn't realize was they had thought that they were going to get these cartridges out on 4K parts. Well, they eventually got the first one, the Donkey Kong, out on 16K. Eventually. But that was only after we released it on 3 8K parts, 24K. So they cost reduced over time, but
sure.
It took a lot of space to make those video games.
Yeah, that's what Malice is saying here. He said he had the Coleco Telstar. I remember us playing the quarterback game there, but he was saying, yeah, exactly that only the rich kids had it in the hood. Yeah.
Hey, Coleco made me buy mine, so.
Oh, no.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they were cheap.
I mean, imagine do you still have it? Did you save it?
I ended up keeping mine for a long time, and then it broke.
Oh, okay.
And I ended up eventually, because it broke, this was late 80s, somewhere in there, and I got rid of it. Well, about 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, I was at a retro video game conference in Las Vegas, and was signing things for a fan, and I happened to mention that I didn't have a ColecoVision anymore. And he goes, "If you sign these for me, I'll get you one." And a couple years later, another year later or so, at an event in Portland, he had a ColecoVision there for me, and I've got it up on my shelf.
Oh, that's awesome!
That's incredible.
Yeah. The thing is, I still have I still have most of my cartridges, and I have an Atom computer in the original box.
Wow.
Box isn't in great shape, so I don't know if a museum is going to want it, but that's its probably eventual fate.
Well, I'll tell you, it hits a point where there ain't that many of them out there to begin with. So if you have one at all, like they become collector's items for sure.
Yeah. I know it's a reconditioned ColecoVision, so hopefully it works. I've actually never tried it.
Probably best not to try it at this point. It crumbles into dust on you.
Yeah.
That's pretty fantastic, though, because, I mean, if you think of those titles, I mean, Donkey Kong was the prepackaged game in that one, right? That was the one that came with?
Yeah, it was the one it shipped with. One of the things to understand about how we did these cartridges is there was no such thing as source code. There was no such thing as somebody giving you the graphics from the game. We did these these arcade knockoffs by sitting there with stopwatches, not even digital ones, mechanical stopwatches, and measuring tapes.
Oh, God.
As we measured distances on the screen, we counted pixels, we figured timing out, and we wrote extensive documentation of our analysis of how these things played. Wow. We had our...
Sounds agonizing.
Now I suddenly don't envy your job anymore. I can imagine the countless hours down there just measuring away on...
These documents would often have to go to people whose first language was not English.
Yep.
So my boss was a stickler about words mean things. So language had to be precise, layouts had to be precise. we did all the graphics by drawing them, analyzing the motion and the animation, and then hand drawing frames on graph paper we created with Marvy markers so that they were color. And then those color marker drawings would be color photocopied, which in 1982 was also fucking expensive per page.
Oh.
And those copies would end up being sent to the developers. So we send them off a whole package in an arcade, and then the game designer would ride herd on the project for the next 8 to 9 months.
So what you're suggesting is maybe their business model had some giant red flags in there with the expenses.
I think they had the right idea. And it was a good product. The thing is we simulated the look of those arcades. We weren't arcade perfect, but we were the closest thing out there to what those arcade games looked like.
Yeah, that's truly astonishing.
Which is impressive when you think of the size of an arcade machine. I mean, it's that big for a reason, because it needed that box space to exist some of it underneath, but it had to be pretty good size to do what it had to do. So to miniaturize it, essentially, like
the big monitor up on top, and then you had the boards and the memory inside, but most of it was just space because you had to build something solid enough to put the coin box in the front and be able to have your technicians get inside of it to work on it.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that part.
My wife, that was one of her first jobs. She was an arcade repair technician.
Wow.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she was a skinny kid back then.
Yeah, I was doing some research ahead of time, and I started looking at your wife's bio as well, and it was just like yours was already like super interesting. And then I looked over and I'm like, Jesus, like how many things have these two been up to? This is like truly astonishing. I don't know. It's amazing how people find each other, I guess, is the other part of that. It's so clearly there was a lot of overlap.
There's a story.
Yeah.
But
So tell us a little. We know that you worked with Coleco then, but you worked on a lot of other more modern titles that our viewers will probably recognize. I mean, obviously Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, everyone knows them, but you didn't stop there though. When you continued on.
What happened is in 1983 through 85, the entire video game industry crashed. Wipeout. Everybody who worked in video games, not necessarily computer games, but video games, basically ended up out of work. So I got laid off from Coleco in 1985, summer of 1985. I was like one of the last people to go for the previous 6 months because I was a department manager. Every month or every few weeks, I had to say, okay, your project is done. I'm going to, it's your time to go out the door.
Ouch.
Yeah, that stuff's a really bad thing at Survivor, right? Where every week they're putting out another torch and sending another one out the door.
Yep. One of the best things was where one of my designers, and the other thing to understand about almost all of my designers were tabletop game designers first.
Oh, okay.
I hired them out of the role-playing game market. I had a board game designer. I had some war game designers working for me. So we were all tabletop. But one of the guys I worked for, came up into my office and he says, okay, I'm going to be quitting. I found another job and I'm going to be, here's my 2 weeks. No, I want to give you my 2 weeks notice. And I told him, Joe, no. Let me lay you off.
It's a good boss.
And I did.
It's a good
he
boss.
became my layoff. He got severance bonus and was able to go to his next job immediately afterwards.
That's a good thing. It's nice. Won't get that from everybody, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I spent I ended up working after being let go. I ended up going to work for one of my former bosses from Coleco for a year on electronic toys, electronic gadgets. We did he had a feature phone that he had designed that we ended up doing final development on. We did electronic jewelry.
Electronic jewelry. Okay.
Electronic jewelry. I mean, we tried to take the idea of like what limited features were possible, like in a digital watch, and put them into a piece of fashion jewelry. We had the idea of putting a radio, an FM radio, inside a stylish when I say stylish, only a 13-year-old girl might like it. And we came up with the idea of using LEDs in earrings.
This was the 80s.
Okay. This was the mid 80s.
Perfect timing.
And the colors fit. Everything was plum or raspberry or teal. And that was what I did for a year, and it just was not a good fit for me. And I ended up being let go from the company. And it was one of the best days of my life. I told them I was going to say, I'm going to stay with this because my spouse, we needed the insurance. We had a new baby. And I'm going to stick with this job and give it 110%. And I was trying to go see my boss over that because I knew I was in trouble. And he kept putting me off for 3 days. I was ready to give him that pep talk. And then he called me into his office along with the other partners and said, we need you to sign your stock back to us.
Oh.
We'll give you 30 days to find another job and to train your replacement.
Ooh. It's a harsh business world out there.
Yeah, it was. And yet at the same time, I was so ready to leave. I was elated.
Yeah.
Now, my friend who was working with me, he'd also been my second in command at Coleco. He was just in tears. He was so broken up by it. I mean, we've been working together since 1982 at that point. So I was elated. He was in tears. You probably also might know the name if you're familiar with the game Bunnies and Burrows.
Yeah. I recognize it. Yeah.
Okay, he was the designer of Bunnies and Burrows, Dr. B. Dennis Sestaire. Also the creator of the Druid class for Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow.
Oh,
yeah,
so fantastic.
So we had an all-star We had an all-star team at Coleco.
This was what I was going to follow up with a question. You were talking about your time at Coleco and working for this electronics company. You were saying everyone who worked with you or under you were people, board games or game design. Did you guys play together much? After work, did you go home and play games? Like, is it?
That's how we blew off steam. We would get together over at my place or at one of the other designers' places, and we would play board games or we'd play role. We had a D&D campaign. This name may sound, I don't know if this name will be familiar to you, but Lawrence Schick, White Plume Mountain. He was my senior game designer on my team.
Nice.
Oh, okay.
And he was also our primary AD&D campaign, our DM. So he had a regular game going. I was running RuneQuest. We had a storytelling game where we all just made up characters with no rules and told stories about how they resolved situations. We would play board games occasionally.
That's interesting.
So yeah, and then there was the Grand Army Men versus Dinosaurs, where Lawrence staked out islands in his backyard, and it became one side controlled all the plastic Army Men figures, and the other side controlled the plastic dinosaur figures, and you had little armies and squads, and it was a massive fight.
That almost sounded like a Toy Story spinoff there for a second. When you said,
remember, this was a decade or more before Toy Story.
I know. I'm going to say, like, you can just see though that like that is like something that they could have had done in Toy Story at one point. Like
Lawrence had been at TSR. I hired him after he left TSR, and this was a game that they had actually played out there as well. And so it was the development of the second go round. And I think if I remember, the Army men won because one of the guys set off a nuke.
Well, nuke
Damn
should
it.
win, yeah. That or asteroid.
That's a very 80s thing to worry about, was the nukes. I mean, it was the Cold War. Everyone was talking about nukes, counting nukes. There was nukes
Yep.
everywhere. So.
We still had the Soviet Union back then.
Oh yeah. It's interesting with the, it's just one of those jobs where, these sorts of things, like going in the backyard, coming up with these like projects and like, what could seem like silly, time wasters is valuable. Like, you figure out what does and doesn't work in terms of, bringing people's attention, what holds them there, what keeps them moving along and all of it. And I bet that was like just invaluable, to future work.
We did. I mean, it was a good group to hang out with. We fed off each other quite well. I'm still friends with anyone from that group who is still alive, and I think we're all still alive. Lost track of a few people over the years, but two of us are still active, at least in some degree, in games as professionals. We're talking 40 some years, almost 40 years later.
It's pretty amazing. Very amazing. So there's definitely more there that I want to talk about, but I want to make sure we absolutely hone in on this Patreon, or the Patreon thing here. Or not Patreon,
Okay.
Kickstarter. Sorry, I'm looking at the word Patreon on the screen here.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and make sure we let people know what's there and what they could expect and how they can get involved.
Okay. The Kickstarter is for, and I'm going to reach back out of the camera and pull something into the camera field.
Ooh.
Show and tell time.
And chat, the link is there for
goodness.
Oh, look at the size of that thing.
I
What
see.
is?
This is the first book in the series.
you. I saw the dimensions on this earlier. This
What
is amazing.
is that? That is.
It is a history of Judges Guild. This is the first book in the series. It's essentially, it's what I guess we used to call coffee table books, when when people had coffee tables.
I think could be a coffee table. I mean,
Yeah, that's always been my thought too. But in this case, it has oversized reproductions of some of the first game adventures produced by Judges Guild and its founder, Robert Bob Bledsaw Sr.
look at that map.
This is the first one. And most of the work done in this book predates my arrival at Judges Guild. I joined Judges Guild in October, about around this time, actually a little later, of 1978. I'd been out of college I graduated from college about 4 months earlier, had one job working as a graphic artist for a small print shop, which laid me off because they lost their walk-in traffic.
Yeah.
And that was around the time the Judges Guild hired me. So this book, the second book in the series that's being kickstarted, is basically about me. It's about the Dungeoneer, the history of the Dungeoneer. It contains all 6 issues of the Dungeoneer that I produced in restored format. Not just, later on, Judges Guild reproduced those in something called the Adventuresome Compendium, which was edited, reformatted, not necessarily well printed. These have been scanned in and restored by someone who has been doing that for Goodman Games.
Nice.
They did that on some of the other titles, the Dark Tower and Caverns of Thracia, so that they had the best reproducible quality to work with. So it has all of those. It's got a restored version of Caverns of Thracia, my second adventure for Judges Guild. It has a restored version of Dark Tower and the Book of Treasure Maps. You can see Book of Treasure Maps and Caverns of Thracia on the shelf behind me here.
It's just out of the cropped camera, it looks like.
Yeah, it's well.
Yeah,
This is what
hold it up here so we can show it off.
Book of Treasure Maps
Take it
looks
to your left just slightly.
Oh yeah.
Or your right, I guess it would be. Yeah, there we go. Perfect.
There we go.
That's right in center.
Treasures Guild, the Book of Treasure Maps.
Nice.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Now, are those people you know on the cover there?
Actually, yes.
I really did not expect the answer to be yes to that question.
I knew it was.
Yeah, those are my college game group and me.
Yep.
Oh, wow, really?
I had the idea. Well, the story of that particular book is that I didn't want to do it, but
Okay.
it was Bob Redfaw's idea, and I was an employee, so he wanted me to do it, so I did it. I sat down and thought up like a half a dozen or more titles, not game adventures, but just random ideas for titles for adventures that sounded awesome. So you've got The Lost Temple, The Tomb of Aethering the Damned, The Lone Tower, Wilchedar's Well, and The Crypts of Arcadia. Those each inspired an idea for an adventure, and I wrote, this is in the original, it's a 50-page book, with 54-page book. So all 5 of those adventures fit in there. It's for original Dungeons and Dragons, because by that point, TSR had pulled their Advanced Dungeons and Dragons license. And I wrote the adventures, did a player handout map with each. Well, I had this idea that I wanted to feature adventurers on the cover. And no one else was doing anything with photographs. So I dressed myself and 3 friends up in bits of costume pieces that we had lying around the apartment, or had them bring some of their own clothing with them. I've got wearing the wizards wearing my roommate's bathrobe, the monks wearing my karate gi.
Nice.
I made that helmet for a Halloween costume when I was in college. The cape belonged to my roommate. So we had all these different pieces, and we just posed some pictures and had them taken out in back of our apartment.
That's great.
So I went back like 35 years later. It still looks exactly like that.
Oh, wow.
Minus the adventurers.
Yeah, see, this is one of those things I'm very used to, because my dad's an artist, and so I was constantly my sister and I were always like having to pose in the backyard and stand in these awkward positions for like way too long. And actually, Dad just brought down something he wanted me to show the fans. He just made this necklace of a dragon that you can wear around your neck here.
Oh, very nice.
So there's that. Let me see if I can get it in the camera. Let's see, where's my cropping at? Reverse camera angles. The little face, just on the back.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm having a hard time getting in this shot. There we go. Tight crops tonight.
Yep.
But
that is very cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so there's a lot of those going on.
Yeah, and I did the same thing to my kids growing up. They're in a couple of my covers.
Nice. Yeah, I had one where Dad gave me it was like a metal bowl that he wanted to put on my head. And I thought for sure he was going to turn that into a helmet in the image. It was just the metal bowl. Standing out in the backyard with a sword and this metal bowl on my head. I'm like, all right. Cardboard little vest thing he made. Oh, man. But yeah, that's cool. So that original book, though, that you just showed, if I'm not mistaken, that was 18 inches tall. Is that right?
I think it's 17 by 13 or 17 by 14.
That is monstrous.
I do not have.
That's a big book.
Oh,
you get
yeah, we're gonna get exact dimensions
I'm an
here.
artist. I have a steel ruler.
Is this the same ruler you used to measure pixels with on the screen?
No, I got this to do measurements for 3D printing.
Ooh.
This book, the cover is roughly 18 by 13 and a half. So somewhere in that range.
Yeah, as Malice says, it's a book and a home defense.
I am told that my book, the one that they're doing with my content in it, is going to be thicker.
Ooh.
Yeah. That was a very productive year.
Now I'm inspired to create a magic item that is a shield and a book that you can just strap on there and just walk around with, and it's also a book, because that's pretty much what that pretty much looks like there as you hoist that thing up there. So.
You just have to be able to hold it up. That's the big challenge.
That's the challenge, is the weight of it, right?
Yeah, so we got a couple people in the chat that just popped in. So let me link that again. So we're talking about a Kickstarter that includes some really awesome stuff in there. So definitely go check that out. Make sure you give it a click and see what's over there.
Yeah, some of the stuff that they've been doing in the Kickstarter, they've been sharing a lot of their own perspectives on my history. Some of it's from reference material I provided, but it's also like analysis of the adventures I wrote.
Oh, cool.
But one of the things that's different, you have the adventures in there, but I also wrote 8 different essays that tell my story as a gamer up through the time I left Judges Guild and a little bit what happened afterwards. And I kind of like, hopefully my humor comes through, but I made an effort to both establish the setting of what the times were like, have a little bit of fun with making parody music.
Nice.
But basically, I took a song that was like the number one or very highly rated song at the time I was discussing, and rewrote the lyrics so they applied to what I was writing about in the essay.
Nice. Yeah, that's a fun approach to it. Any particular songs? Any particular songs we should look for?
Oh gosh, I know there's a Bee Gees song in there. There's a take on the Sounds of Silence.
Nice. That was a good one.
Song of Silence. Man, I can't remember all the songs I used. Some of them seem appropriate. Some of them were just short. Others, like, tell the story of why I stopped being able to meet deadlines.
Got you. Yeah.
I mean, I could sing them. I could find them and sing them, but I'll spare you.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's like the two of us. We should probably not be singing on camera.
I sing on camera all the time. I was just talking about Jeff.
That's true. Wednesday nights.
I don't say I sing well. I just say I sing on camera all the time. But so you had this time period where you worked on a lot of these things that are in this Kickstarter. Have you continued to write for games then, as you've continued to game for 47?
Well, what happened is when I went to work for Coleco, I ended up basically I wrote one more game adventure that I had contracted with the company called SPI. They had a role-playing game called Dragon Quest, and they had contracted me to write one adventure for them. The adventure was called Enchanted Wood, or The Enchanted Wood. And I actually consider it one of the best things I've ever written.
Nice.
It's not for Dungeons and Dragons. It's a sandbox style exploration project or exploration area. And I actually, because TSR later acquired SPI, or I should say acquired the assets of SPI, they acquired that game. And so I took bits and pieces of that adventure and worked them into the Forgotten Realms when I was later working for TSR years later.
Very cool. So what were the particular things you think stood out in your projects? I mean, obviously people have kind of a tendency towards certain aspects of the game. You know, what was your call?
Mine is mostly, I think my biggie is exploration. I think that is the itch that the itch that I try to get people to scratch is this idea that these are real places. They just happen to be set in a fantasy place. And part of my whole storytelling is the architecture, exploring these spaces and their relationship to each other, and how people monsters occupy them.
Nice.
So that's kind of my itch, and I tend to think in three dimensions. So there's a lot of interweaving between vertical spaces in a lot of my adventures.
Gotcha.
Okay. So not necessarily the way you think of like a hex clear, where you're moving from like hex to hex to like just kind of discover what's there. But you're talking about like actual, like inside the temples, like looking at how these things interact with like the other, almost in an ecology style way, more so than an actual geography way.
Yeah, if you think about the fact that my history is art, I took a lot of art in college. I really had an interest in old architecture and sculpture. I brought a lot of that into Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. So like a lot of your adventures would feature things like statues, and that would be important pieces of the adventure.
Statues or building, the multi-layer aspect of buildings. The idea that, one of my most famous adventures is based around 2 towers that I buried underground. And that both the towers are architectural pieces separate from the dungeon space around them.
Okay.
Nice. Yeah,
and these were things that like nobody was thinking of doing at the time that you were doing them. It seems.
I'm certain. I have to believe that people were doing them.
People were.
Yeah, I have to believe that I wasn't as original as people want me to be.
It's a hard thing to be. It's hard to invent anything, especially nowadays.
I think the difference is I had these ideas. I could write them down. I could put them in a format that people could use, and I had the ability to do pre-press production.
Yeah, it's just a lot of things to bring together all in one place. So we're kind of getting into our latter half of the time here. So I want to make sure I touch on a couple other things. Now, one of the things I saw is that you are involved at a college and teaching game design.
Nope.
I am wrong.
Not a teacher.
Let me just completely trash the whole idea out.
But you're on the right track. No, it was 2003.
Okay.
There's a gentleman here in the Dallas area who had an idea for a video game school. Oh, okay. Now, I was working in video games at this point. And I had actually been involved. I worked for IdSoft. I've been working for id Software. I did a lot of community interface at that time. One of the things I did was helping people learn how to use our tools to make user-generated content for Quake and Quake 3, Quake 2, Quake 3 Arena. I was trying to basically give our product legs by getting a community developed that would make more content so that people would keep playing the game longer and buy more games and feel good about id Software. So I got involved in community development and education. These people, some of the people who wanted to set up this school knew that, and they approached me. They were wondering if I would be willing to be a part of basically designing the school.
Oh, that's cool.
Designing the program, designing the curriculum. And I was working for Ensemble Studios at that time, so I had a full-time day job. And so I ended up hiring on as a contractor to do some design work. I worked evenings, a couple nights a week, with the head of their curriculum, the director of curriculum, to develop the curriculum for a graduate-level video game program.
Wow.
So I helped them design the overall arc of the program, the projects, and establish the art curriculum and a little bit of the level design curriculum. But mostly I was focused on the art curriculum at that time.
Oh, very cool.
And the idea is that we would take people who knew how to program and make them into game programmers. So it's graduate level. You had to have at least undergraduate level skills. We would take people who could make art. This wasn't Art 101. You had to be a competent artist already, and we would turn you into a video game artist. by the time you were done. And then we would take, God only knows what the qualifications were, but we would teach you to become level designers.
Thought we were going to talk about business management at that point.
Oh, no, that actually came later. That was after my time. They actually put in a production role.
Yeah.
But the idea was at the end of the program, you would walk out of the program having designed 3 different games, produced 3 different games, different kinds of games, and have the skills needed and the theory understanding to make games.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
do it all in 18 months.
Was there any games that got their origins in this that eventually maybe made it, like in their infancy? Do you know? I'm
not certain. I'm not as familiar with the program now. I know that a number of people left the program to go on and make really kick-ass games. I think one of the designers was, if I remember correctly, he was like creative director on The Last of Us.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Oh,
yeah, I think that's the title he was on. My son went through the program.
Very cool.
He's still working as an artist in games, game-related content, and he's a 10-year veteran already.
Wow.
No, let me think. He's a 15-year veteran. Holy!
Oh man,
where did the time go?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Malice wants to know which school this was.
It's the SMU Guildhall.
Okay.
SMU Guildhall.
Southern Methodist University in Dallas.
Gotcha.
The game campus is out in Western Plano.
Okay.
Near the shops at Legacy.
All right.
So this is one of those subjects I almost started into. I went back to school to DePaul University, and they actually had a game design undergraduate program. And I was looking at that, or CS, and everybody in the game industry told me go CS. And I was like, all right. And I come out and I realized I would have had a portfolio of games and stuff ready to rock, and I don't know.
Well, I'm going to say right now the industry is hard. If you're a programmer, yeah, you can probably break in. In the USA, there is a demand for engineers. There's a demand for quality engineers and a lot of software-related skills. Not so much for artists and designers, unfortunately.
Oh, interesting.
If you're really super talented, yeah, you'll find a place. If you're, wow, it was either this or, some other type of non-game making career, yeah, probably the other way to go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the technical side of things is fascinating to me, though. So like that works out. But now I'm putting myself through the crunch of trying to learn some of these engines on the side. It's just kind of side projects, and it's very different. It's very different.
And I said one of the things we taught at the Guildhall was you got thrown into learning those engines, and for a software engineer, you actually had to make your own.
Oh wow!
So yeah, as I say, this is graduate level stuff. You're ending up with a master's degree.
Yeah.
Right. That's pretty incredible when you think about it, that you sat down and helped kind of create some of at least the baseline stuff that this would grow out
Yeah,
of.
like I said, this has been 17 years now. They every 6 months, I think they graduate a class. So, and every class is at least roughly 20 to 30 people. So it's been cranking out.
Wow.
A lot of talented people.
Looks like Malice down there in the chat says that a big name from there is the producer tech project manager at Fortnite for Fortnite at Epic. So it was
could be.
So there's a very popular current game anyway. So
yes, I was there for like the first 10 graduations.
That's cool.
I was up on stage. My job was reading off the names of the graduates as they walked across the stage, and that was considering we had an international student body.
Yeah, it could be rough. It could be challenging for sure. Yeah,
but I never went into it cold. I would always go and talk with everyone in line, so I could so I could pronounce their name properly when they walked across.
It certainly saved my day today. At least I hope. Yeah, that's really cool, though. I mean, getting into these like kind of leadership positions, being able to create that next, generation of designers, or I'm trying to find a clean way to say this over to my other thing here, and I'm failing. But you've also done some other work that's really interesting to me, and that's the advocacy. And at least from what I was reading on here, it looks like it was kind of started within the gaming industry or within the video game world. Is that correct?
I actually got into. I'm trying to think of what. I probably actually got into it through some advocacy of my wife's. She has spent some time on the board of GLAD recently. But I got into just talking. Once I was comfortable with my own life, I started being able to talk more about it online, and got hooked up with some people who were doing. It was a project to document violence against transgender people.
Ooh, boy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a tough subject to deal with. Yeah.
They were putting together a database that would basically log where attacks happened around the world, and just try and get an actual clear picture of what was going on. Well, in the middle of that, I started getting involved with them first as a donor, and then actually ended up on the board of the group. And one of the things that fell in our lap at the end of 2014 was there was a young transgender girl in Ohio who, after being subjected to conversion therapy by her parents, stepped out in front of a truck in the middle of the night just after Christmas.
Oh, wow.
This is Leah's Law?
Leelah.
Leelah.
And we took up her cause. She actually basically left out a message to us for us, on her personal blog to say, please fix society.
Wow.
And our group was one of several that spearheaded 2 petition efforts back when we had one through the whitehouse.gov, and I'm trying to remember what the other one was, but these 2 petition efforts to get petitions to try and get government to create a overarching law that would ban conversion therapy, especially for minors.
Yeah.
Conversion therapy is where if you're not familiar with it, is where you subject people to essentially torture to get them to change either their sexual attraction or their gender identity to conform, usually with religious views.
Right.
Yeah, right. That's where you do definitely hear it the most.
Yep. So we ran this campaign, and the White House Gov one, boom, we got enough signatures to get to qualify to get the attention of the Obama White House.
Yeah. This is 2015, I think.
It was early 2015.
Yeah.
And then with the other one, we produced one of their fastest rising petition drives that ever happened. Wow. I think we ended up with over 300,000 signatures.
That's wonderful.
That is impressive.
The end result, is we did talk with one of the senior policy advisors in the Obama White House. We had a chat with her one afternoon, phone chat, and we were basically told that this had to happen on a state-by-state basis, that because it involved psychiatric care, the states licensed that, and each individual state had to deal with it. The good news is that slowly, very slowly, in a lot of states, this has been going away.
Right.
Well,
it's a long fight when things get dumped down to the states, but that is the fate of a lot of things that eventually do make its way through all of society and push into all 50 states before it's done. But that is the long road that sometimes has to happen.
It's been a long
But what
way.
it has gone is it brought attention more just to the fact that it's going on and that what it is, and how they approach these things, and it's a terrible thing to do to your kid.
It really is. Yeah. We got raided in the middle of that, so kind of a strange place for you guys to jump into in the middle of that. But we are we were talking to Jennell here. She is very well loved in the gaming community, as she has put together some amazing stuff for the original Dungeons and Dragons that I believe I linked in here. There's a Kickstarter going on for that, and I think it's on cooldown, so it's not going to actually let me link it again. And she's also been involved in the video game world. So we were talking about some old school titles like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man, also stuff like Quake. And now we've been talking about some of the other things she's been involved with, which was Advocacy.
If you want to make the Lollygaggers and Defenders of Kobold there, if you want to make them click that link, what you tell them is, that link right there will take you to a Kickstarter being put together by Goodman Games, because the Lollygaggers and Defenders of Kobold, they appear on Goodman Games every week on their stream channel. They were on there the other night. I was watching them. They're big fans of Goodman Games, so they're putting that together. It's Jennell's work that she did through Judges Guild, many years ago, and that stuff is being reproduced and put out, and you can hit that Kickstarter there and help support it.
Absolutely. Yeah, so obviously it's a marathon, and I think it's the case for a lot of causes. Obviously, that we've been seeing over the last couple decades in particular is, some serious progress, some steps backwards, hopefully some steps quickly forward. And, I'm very happy to see that there are people leading the charge.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anywhere I thought I read something about this Kickstarter that some of the proceeds are going to charity?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was an incident that happened with the children of and grandchildren of, or should say, the namesake son and grandson of the founder of Judges Guild earlier this year. And they got called out for a number of racist, anti-Semitic,
Oh boy.
homophobic, unpleasant posts they made online on Facebook, and then essentially doubled down on it later when they were called on it.
Man.
And it kind of soured a lot of people's attitude towards Judges Guild, including most of their licensees.
Mm-hmm.
Joe and I had been working on this book now for 2 or 3 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
He's been collecting material, getting it scanned. I've been writing essays, doing interviews with one of his writers.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly we had this, basically what could have blown it out of the water event happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we got together in February, and we met at a game con out in California. We were where I was living at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a little video and talked about what we planned to do with this. And our plans were that we were going to take what was essentially the royalty that would have been given to Judges Guild and divide it up between two nonprofits that dealt with discrimination and anti-defamation.
That was a tough word, isn't it?
Yeah, it's anti-defamation. So we decided on, I wanted to give a donation to GLAD, mm-hmm. the organization that deals with anti-defamation against gay, lesbian, transgender people. Mm-hmm. And they deal with it in the media. And the media now includes games. Mm-hmm. And my wife has been a part of the board of directors. Mm-hmm. The other one is the Anti-Defamation League, which, if I remember correctly, focuses on attacks against Jewish people.
Mm. Yeah, large amount, yeah.
Yeah, so we have these two charities. Well, the son of the founder of Judges Guild basically came back to us and said, well, okay, take the royalty that you would have given us and also add it to the donation.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay. Good.
if anyone's concerned and still upset with Judges Guild over this, they're not getting any money from this. That's one of the things we want to stress. That it's not
that's
just
an important thing to note.
Yeah, it's not just the money is going to these two nonprofits. Some of the money, I should say. It's that we are also not giving any money to the people who caused the problem in the first place.
Right. Well, it's an amazing thing. I mean, that, in 2020, we're in a situation where people are getting called out and things are being corrected. And that's really nice progress to see, because, I think back to the 90s growing up, going through high school and all that, and it's a completely different world.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't feel at all the same. And maybe some of it's because we're out in the boonies out there. Oh, we got another raid. Hey, Diesel Shot, thank you.
Diesel Shot Company, welcome.
Yeah. Well, I will throw that link to the Kickstarter again. There it is. Apparently before I just misspelled it. But yeah, it's really good to see people stepping up, like I was saying before, and just correcting things where they come up and making a space for people. Because obviously the hobbies and the media and everything else is expanding and making room for people, and it's part of what we're really pushing out here as well. Is we really want to make sure everyone's happy to be.
I think people would be surprised to discover how much of the history of their hobby, whether it's video games or tabletop, was created by LGBT people.
Oh yeah, I don't doubt it at all. Yeah,
I think it's definitely. There's definitely a lot more of it there than what people realize. Like it really is. It really is the case.
Even even when you go back to the old school, trans people, gay people, we've been a part of it forever.
Oh yeah,
it's a very open, receptive community with the 5e, with this big influx of new players into D&D. There's a very, very big push for all that inclusivity with these people, and we're seeing it. And you think of it as a new thing when you get out there into the Twitter world and you see it. You think of it as like this thing that came in with 5e. But you're right, though. I mean, it's been there all along. It's just maybe more in the light and more focus is put on it now than it used to be.
I think it's been just a complete change in the fact that we're more comfortable being open about things now, even though there's still pushback, even though there's still hate.
Sure.
You feel, I don't want to say whatever to go. You feel not necessarily safer, but more supported.
Right. Yeah.
When you step out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think back to like just conventions, going to them, I always remember seeing, ample evidence of, LGBT everywhere. It was just like, that was just the norm. Like, I didn't even think of that as abnormal because I'd gone to these cons so often as a kid. Except for that, I lived in a small town in the middle of Illinois where it was very conservative.
Very rarely did you meet anyone who would come out and tell you anything like that about themselves where we lived. But you make it to college, you get out of the little small town. Sometimes you get out there, you meet people, you learn like it's not as far away as you think it is.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's been really good to see. Like I said before, things whether it's TV shows, movies, kind of just making it just a regular thing as opposed to like a whole focus on it as an episode. And of course now like we've been seeing here is advocacy groups and people stepping up and donating and stepping up and being there to help shut down some troubling moments. So that's good to see too. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys coming. You did miss a lot of the thing. We're actually wrapping up here in the next minute or so. But this will be on the video on demand, and there is a YouTube channel where you can see the rest of the episode where we talked about a ton of things. Not just this issue here, but we also talked about, Dungeons and Dragons stuff. We talked about video games, and we kind of took a trip down memory lane across some of these things. It was pretty cool. So definitely check that out later. So we are, in fact, in that last 10 minutes of our show where we usually do just nothing but plugs. Make sure that if we have links, if we have anything else you want to speak up about and share that you want us to know about, this is a good spot to do it.
Okay. Well, I am still actively designing.
Okay.
I had, like I say, 2 years ago, I published a game adventure called The Dragon's Secret for Swords and Wizardry. It's published through Drive-Thru.
Mm-hmm.
You can get either PDF or printed version. It's through my my publishing brand, which is called Fifth Wall Games and Miniatures.
Fifth Wall Games and Miniatures. All right.
And that's on Drive-Thru. There's another product that I did with Darcy Perry of Star Hat Miniatures, that's called Quack Keep.
Okay.
And it was part of a Kickstarter that he did of his miniatures, which at that Kickstarter, most of the miniatures in it were ducks. And most of the ducks were kind of parodies or tributes to popular fantasy and science fiction characters. So you've got
Sounds amazing.
There's a Froduck in there.
Nice.
There's the Duck Tour. There's a Wonder Woman duck. There's a Duck Knight. So he and I are both into terrible puns. So we collaborated on the book that went along with it, and it's basically a setting in a game world that can in theory be plugged in anywhere. In fact, Darcy just plugged it into his new world that he's developing for a game called Duck Quest. And it sits in his game world. Consider I will probably have it if I do a game campaign world. It'll probably sit in mine because it's the sort of place that exists in multiple places at once.
Nice.
So I've got that going. Some people may be familiar with a book series I did back in the 90s called Central Casting.
Mm-hmm.
The book series was about using dice tables to create detailed character backgrounds. I did one for fantasy, I did one for science fiction, and I did one for contemporary 20th century. I guess now we're 21st century. But these were all published through Task Force Games back in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I am working on a ground-up reboot of that first book. I've been working on it for a couple of years now.
So you said it was an interview questionnaire kind of thing?
No, it's a walkthrough. It's a dice table walkthrough.
Oh, okay.
So basically,
you get done with a bunch of roles, you got a character background.
Yep. Or it can also be used. Most of the stuff I'm writing right now are story hooks.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it says, "Hey, this happened in my character's past, but it was left open-ended."
Gotcha.
So maybe there's an adventure to go on with your adventuring friends and resolve that story, or creating NPCs. The idea is it's almost whatever you want it to be. I know people have used it to generate characters for novels.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
So it's not it's got a lot of depth to it. It's probably going to be a freaking large book because I think I'm somewhere in the realm of 700 to 800,000 words right now.
All right.
Better make sure you have that full page space again.
This is not a small project here. When you say a ground up reboot, this is a major project.
Reboot. The original books were like 100 pages long. These are easily. And then the final thing I've got going is right now I've got a 5e adventure that I need to take into production after another round of edits. I've done a couple sets of blind play tests on it, gotten the feedback, and about ready to try and get it into production this fall.
Well, fantastic. Well, whenever that's all ready to kick out, make sure you stop back by and we can make sure you get that in front of some more people.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, Dustin, I guess we should plug our stuff, huh?
Yeah, we probably should. So, again, welcome to the Wisdom Check. Monday nights, 10 p.m. Central Time. You'll find me and Jeff here with a guest every week. And I believe I'm going to check my schedule next week. I
think we got Friendon? Yeah.
Yep. Next week, we have artist Friendon who will be stopping by the show. Mm-hmm. So if you're a big fan of Zines, you may have heard Defenders of Cobalt there. Chuck who was on the show here with us a couple weeks ago, talk about their Zine, Dan Dies at the End, which you can find on DriveThruRPG for an entire 50 cents. The best 50 cents you'll spend all day, I guarantee you. But a friend that did all the artwork for that Zine that they put together through Defenders of Cobalt, and he's going to come on. We're going to talk about his gaming experiences. I've been watching a bit of Friend and Play with the Kobolds and them over at Goodman Games. You can find them over there on Saturday nights playing some Stranger Danger. And you'll be able to see him next week here on the show. Then Tuesdays, Cameron be doing Bardic Knowledge, I believe, because Barbell Knowledge was last week. So this week should be a Bardic Knowledge where he's making game music live for our stream games and for other people's stream games. And you can watch him compose music live here on the channel, 8 p.m. Central Time. Cameron will be back with more Bardic Knowledge. Wednesday is game session number 1 of our new All Flesh Must Be Eaten game. Don't sleep. It's zombie apocalypse has finally hit TT2KB, and our DM Levi is running us through our brand new characters we made blindly last week into the zombie apocalypse. So that'll be fun. 10 p.m. Central Time Wednesday. Thursday, we are lining up a video game night, which is usually when we play our video games here at TT2KB. You guys which game are we going to be playing this week, Jeff? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea. We're kicking around a few ideas, but it really comes down to who's still around this week, because I think we got some people out of town.
We'll see if video game night happens on Thursday.
Nothing else. I may do some Remnant on my own, so that'll be fun.
Friday night's a night off around here. We don't stream. We often support our friend Air Laser. Their stream usually runs on Fridays. And Baldur's Gate 3, maybe we'll be getting into that pretty soon.
Eventually.
It's definitely on the list. And then Saturday, if my math is correct, Everstorm, our 5e high seas adventure game, returns Saturday night, 10 p.m. Central Time. Jeff, am I missing anything? I think that covers it.
I think you got everything. I am currently spamming all of our links into the chat. So if you haven't joined our Discord, be sure to do that. We got a lot of people hanging out there, trying to build a community, make sure everyone keeps in touch, shares ideas, and gets everything going. We also have that YouTube where all the past episodes of this show are on there, which this is episode 86, believe it or not.
86. 86 Mondays in a row. We haven't missed one yet for almost 2 years.
Yep.
I may have a box here with a life in it that I could give to you guys.
I forgot what those things are. So we got that. We got all of our other content as well. All of our 5th edition game on there. Some Pathfinder 2e, a bunch of other stuff. Dustin's game, Zweihander. So there's a lot of content on there. You go check it out. And then the last link I set up there was for my dad's artwork, David Lee Pancake. Go check it out. He wanted me to show off this thing he just finished. It is a necklace dragon that, see if I can actually put it on correctly. Yeah, it flipped around now. There we go. So it wraps around you.
Oh, yeah, look at that. It's stylish and artistic at the same time.
Yep, there you go. And he streams as well. Yeah, very interactive.
That is always the one thing I've appreciated about your dad's art. He's always found a way to take his art and make it functional.
Yeah, the
functionality of the art has always impressed me.
Yep. So there's plenty of stuff on there. Go support that. We're going to go ahead and support somebody else. So some of you all showed up on raids. We're going to raid somebody else. And while Dustin's looking,
we are. I'm going to work on that. And I was just going to note also. Hold on a second here. Go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say. Thank you so very much, Jennell. It's been a wonderful conversation. Talked about a lot of interesting things, and I appreciate the time you carved out for us today.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
I remember what to say. That YouTube, we are nearing 200 subscribers on our YouTube channel, and when we hit 200, we have a core book for Pathfinder 2nd Edition that we're going to be giving away. So if you get onto our YouTube channel, if you haven't already, hit subscribe. We are like just a mere 14, I think, subs away. Yeah. Something like that. Around the range of about 14. So if you haven't subscribed to us on YouTube yet, do so. If you're one of our subscribers, you will then be a 1 in 200 chance of winning yourself a Pathfinder core book. So we have that thing all ready to go. In the meantime, I'm taking a look, and I see that our friends... Quest and Chaos is playing some Dungeons and Dragons tonight. Let's go say hi to our friends over at Quest and Chaos.